Hey everybody, thanks Amit. I actually told you the Pilates thing in confidence, but you just outed me. So how is everybody? How's the day going so far? Woo! ReactNext. I hope everyone's had their coffee and they're feeling good. And to be honest, let's see, okay, cool. I'm super excited and happy that you're all here. And it's not just because every time I go and present a talk, I'm afraid no one will come. It's honestly because I think that we're on the verge of a major change in testing in the front-end area. And no, I know what you're thinking. I'm not talking about AI, because AI can do things like this. This guy asked ChatGPT to draw instructions on how to mount my TV. And this is cool. TV is mounted. I don't see any problem with that. Yeah, but seriously now, there's a major change going to happen. It's coming to us whether we like it or not. And the reason for that is because testing library has some issues. And I'm here saying that out loud. Testing library has some issues. And we feel it. We all feel it daily. For example, who has test runs that take more than 5 seconds? Please raise your hand. And keep those hands up, okay? Who has more than 10 seconds? Okay, 20 seconds. 30 seconds? Will I break anyone? 40 seconds? Okay, yeah, we all know. This is an example I took. It wasn't hard to find. This is a test run that takes around 100,000 milliseconds. So that's a minute and 40 seconds, okay? And this is another example for a testing library test run that took around 20,000 milliseconds, which is around 20 seconds, okay? That's a lot. And this is when things work, okay? But what happens when things doesn't work? What happens when our tests fail? And honestly, they fail a lot. Testing library will provide us with a utility called log testing playground URL. Who saw this? Nobody? Okay, so this actually opens, if you copy this link, it will open you a UI which doesn't even mimic the UI that is actually developed by you, that will present something like the DOM that you had. And testing library also exports a utility called screen debug that outputs the entire DOM to the terminal. And I have to admit, this isn't helpful at all. I mean, debugging something with this is impossible, okay? So yeah, testing library has some issues. We have to admit it. But will Playwright Component Test be the one to solve these issues? Will Playwright Component Test be the change we're all yearning for in the front-end area for testing? So in order to do that, I decided I'll dirty my hands with a real-life application. And you had a spoiler. Every time I need to build a real-life application, what I do is I go and I build a Pokédex. So let's have a look at that. So this is our Pokédex, okay? And I'm sorry if you don't know Pokemon, not that important. We can see that we have 151 Pokemons in here. And if I'll filter by name, I can see Bulbasaur, I can see Pikachu, and everything is here. If I click on one of the Pokemons, let's say I click on Bulbasaur, I see that the URL has changed. You probably can't see it, but the URL has changed. And here I see in the main area, I see the Pokemon image, the evolutions, the types of the Pokemon, in this case, grass and poison, and the names in different languages. And while working on this app, I actually found out that Charizard, for example, is actually called Dracofou in French. Okay, so this is a nice addition. So this is our app for today. And what is actually our mission? Our mission is to build tests using both testing library and Playwright Component Tests and see which of them has the best developer experience, syntax, features, and performance. Okay, this is the most interesting part. But before we dive into that specific area, let's make it official. Hello, everybody. It's super nice to meet you and see you all here. My name is Matan Borenkraout, and I'm a senior software engineer at Microsoft, And as Amit already told you, you probably already know that. I love React, and I mostly talk at conferences about testing, but I also very like React, and I have multiple blog posts about that. And also, I'm one of the active maintainers for testing library, which I hope that you're using if you're here. This is my site. If you want to see it, go ahead. And this is my X handle or Twitter handle. You can feel free to follow. I talk about frontend mostly. And as Amit also told you, some of you may have seen a conflict in my introduction. Because on the one hand, I'm a Microsoft employee. And on the other hand, I'm a testing library maintainer. And this puts me in a difficult position, okay? Because each side will probably try to pull me to its direction. And this might get a bit tricky in this talk. So I promise you, I'll be giving my honest take here because we have to admit it. I'm a professional. We're all professionals. I'll do my best to give my honest take. So as long as we're all ready, and this is AI, it's not me. I didn't draw this. Let's get ready. On the left, we have testing library. And testing library is a set of simple and complete testing utilities that encourage good testing practices. And this is our motto. And as our motto says, it means that we're only exporting functions, okay? When you use testing library, you actually call functions. This is what we give you. We support currently more than 10 frameworks, starting from React, which is our most popular, Angular, Svelte, Vue, and many, many more. The entire organization, the entire testing library organization, has around 37 million weekly downloads, so pushing a commit and releasing a new version is quite scary. And the main issue is we don't provide any test runner, so you need to bring your own, and we'll talk about it in this session. And we also don't provide any testing environment, okay? So then we'll talk about that too. And on the right, we have Playwright. And Playwright is actually fast and reliable end-to-end testing for modern web apps. And specifically, or you know what, just a second, Playwright is an end-to-end test runner, so the test runner is already built in. It also provides cross-platform support and cross-browser, so you can run your test using Chromium and Firefox and WebKit. At the moment, Playwright has around 5 million weekly downloads, so it's quite popular. And in this specific session, we're going to talk about a specific feature called Playwright Component Tests, which is experimental. And what does Playwright Component Test actually mean? It means that you'll test your component inside the browser, okay? Not as an end-to-end, as a unit test, as a component test. At the moment, Playwright Component Test supports React, Vue, Svelte, and Solid, and there's also a pull request to support Angular. What happens in Playwright Component Tests is that your components are mounted onto a custom index HTML that you can probably tweak on your own. And Playwright will just navigate to that index HTML, giving you the entire experience for testing your component. And this entire solution is powered by Vite, and we'll touch that later in the talk. So our first round, the first thing I want to compare is the developer experience. And let's take an example and say I want to test my Pokemon list item. So this is the Pokemon list item, okay? Every item is a list item. And we can see that it's wrapped with a link, an anchor element. So I want to test that my component actually behaves and looks as I want to. In testing library, how would we test this? The first thing we're doing is we're rendering the component, okay? And I'm not talking about where I'm rendering it to. We'll touch that later. So I'm rendering the component. We see I have a Pokemon item component. I pass the props, and then I wrap it with a browser router because I'm testing, I'm using React router, and I'm actually testing the anchor. Right after that, what I'm doing is I want to verify that I have an image with the alternative text of Bulbasaur. And after that, I want to query for an element with this specific accessible name, which means that this is the actual component that I'm seeing. This is testing library. This is probably something you all know. In Playwright Component Tests, the things look a bit different. The first thing we're doing is we're mounting the component. We're not rendering it. So we call await mount, and then we render the component the same way we did in testing library. Right after that, what we're doing is we're calling get by alt text. We're getting the image by the alternative text, same as we did with a testing library. And the second thing we're doing is we're getting by row link. We're trying to query an element with the role of link and the accessible name of Balbazar. So this is Playwright Component Tests. Did you see any similarities? Well, I've grayed out the parts that aren't similar. And these tests look quite the same to me, okay? I just call different functions, but the queries are entirely the same. So in testing library, we've actually pioneered the approach of testing the application the way our users are using it. So the more your tests resemble the way your software is used, the more confidence they can give you. And this is a quote by Kenzie Dott. And it means that our queries are accessible by default. So we provide the queries like by role, by placeholder text, by label text, by title, by display value. And all of these, starting from October 2022, are already supported in Playwright. Okay? So Playwright actually adopted the entire testing library queries because they found it useful. And it's important to note that this isn't implemented using testing library. Okay? They have their different implementation, but this is what they offer. With a small change, by display value isn't implemented. To be honest, I tried to understand why. I couldn't find the real reason. And Playwright also gives us the most requested query that people ask in testing library. Do you have an idea what it is? Data ID is actually already supported. Any more ideas? Okay, so the most requested testing library query or feature is actually get by CSS selector, get by ID, get by class. And this won't ever be supported in testing library because it actually misses the purpose. We don't want to test implementation details. And Playwright Component Tests actually provides this using the page locator. It means that there's CSS query support, ID support, XPath, and React selectors. So you can query your element using the component name. And as Ross says, please don't do it, okay? It's basically taking us back to the enzyme era where we actually tested for implementation details. And CSS IDs, XPath, and component names are implementation details. So if we'll go and we'll change the CSS class name, our test will immediately break. And this is coupling our tests with our CSS, and this is highly not recommended. So really, don't do it. And another small change is that when we use for asynchronous operations in testing library, whenever an element isn't in the DOM already, we need to use find by instead of get by. And to wait for assertion, we need to use wait for. In Playwright, locators are auto-awaited, so it means that we don't need to differentiate between get by or find by. We can always use get by. And assertions are automatically retried. So there's no need to use wait for whenever we want to wait for an assertion to pass. This is automatically supported. Okay, but that was the happy flow. That was when everything passes and works. And as we said before, things usually break. So what happens when our tests break? I love this GIF. Whenever things break inside testing library, whenever we write a test that doesn't pass, for errors and debugging, we have screen.debug, undefined and infinity will print the entire DOM. Okay, if you didn't know that, this is a nice hack. And we get the entire DOM in our terminal, which isn't really cool, as we saw before. And the second one is log testing playground URL, which will give us the URL that we can navigate to, same as we saw in the introduction. In Playwright, in Playwright Component Tests, since we're using Playwright, we get the entire Playwright solution, which means that we'll get failure report, we'll get automatic screenshot for failures, and we'll also get browser dev tools. So we'll be able to debug our components inside the browser dev tools, where we usually live, to be honest. And let's see an example. And this is our component. Okay, this is our test, sorry. And we can see that we have, I want this one. Okay, and as we saw in the example, this is our test. We can see that we mount it using the mount function. We render Pokemon item. And let's say that instead of getting by alt text Bulbasaur, I'll query by alt text Bulbasaur 1. Okay, and let's run component test. Oh, sorry, not this. Okay, so now what will happen is that Playwright will go and will try to run my test. This is the specific test I wanted it to run. We can see that it's running one test using one worker. And now my test runs. Okay, and we see that it failed, okay? And let's see what we got. We see that it failed, timed out 5,000 milliseconds waiting for the specific locator. And we can see specifically where it failed, and we don't get any irrelevant data. And also, we can see the screenshot. Okay, we can see why our test actually failed, and this gives us a good direction that the image is actually there, but probably something is messed up with the alt text. And this is super cool, and this is what we get when we actually adopt our tests to Playwright. Okay. So let's take it up a notch and say that we want to mock the search functionality. So we want to verify that whenever we make a change in the input, our callback is being called. And I'd also want to mock the network calls, because we don't want any network calls in our tests. So let's get back to our tests. I can close this one. Oh, sorry. Let's see it here. So in testing library, we get mocking out of the box using our test runner. In this specific example, I have vtest. I'm using vtest. If you're still using Jest, I highly recommend giving a vtest a try. And whenever I want a mocked function in vtest, I write vi.fn, and then I get this specific mocked function. We can see that I'm rendering it, and I'm passing my mock function to the component. So on search, we'll receive mock search. And after that, what I'm doing is I'm typing in the search box, I'm typing the value Bulbasaur, and then I wait for the mocked function to be called with Bulbasaur. So this is quite straightforward. In Playwright, okay, this is we saw, and my network calls are mocked using mock service worker. I'm actually not touching mock service worker as a solution in this talk, but it's in the repo, so you can have a look. In Playwright, the solution is much different, because Playwright is an end-to-end test runner. So it means it doesn't have any function mocking functionality, because it's not meant for that. So in order to mock a function, we need to build that mock on our own. So let's see what we can do. We create a function, we save a flag saying is expected value false. We create the function. Whenever this function is called with the value of Bulbasaur, we turn that flag on, and this is our mock function. We pass the mock function using the onSearch prop, and we get by role search box, we fill that input with Bulbasaur, and then we assert that the value is actually set to true. Okay? This isn't ideal. So it means that in Playwright component tests, there's no native mocking solution. We can either build one on our own, or we can use Synon or any other package that provides this kind of solutions. But for network mocks, since in end-to-end you usually want to mock your network, you can use Playwright Intercept, which is a great solution for this specific use case. Round 2 is visual testing. And I want to show you another demo or another feature I have in my app. And I'm sorry about this. This is going to burn your eyes. I've also took the time to provide light mode support in this application. So I have light mode support and I have dark mode support. And I want to test in my component that this is actually working and it's not breaking. In testing library, how would you do that? Any ideas? Nothing. So in testing library, we can use the assertion to match styles, to have style, but this means we'll need to go over the entire tree and test that all of them have the dark mode styles. So practically, there's no easy way to do it, okay, in testing library. But in Playwright, as we saw, we're using the entire Playwright functionalities. So we get emulation out of the box. And when we get emulation out of the box, it means that we get responsiveness test, we get color scheme, and we get devices. And we can also use a one-liner for visual regression. We can call to have screenshot, okay? So let's see it in action. And this is our component. This is the same component. I've actually duplicated a test to have support for light mode and for dark mode, okay? And let's start here. And let's say test.use, okay, this is the actual syntax, and Copilot is wrong here, it's not called theme, it's called color scheme light, and let's also say that I want the viewport to be width 500 and height 500. And let me duplicate this one to the next test and pass it with dark. What do you think, will it work? Anybody? Yes. Okay, so let's see it. And we can see now that we have 2 tests running. Okay, it already failed, so I won't drink my water now. And let's see why it failed. And we can see that it failed because the snapshot doesn't exist yet, okay? This is the first time I'm running this. And let's have a look at the test, okay? This is the screenshot we got. So this is quite cool. And let's get back to our second test. This was light mode. And this is dark mode, okay? This is usually the time people clap and I drink water, so give me a second. Thank you, thank you. It's all me. Cool, so that was that. So I think there's a clear winner here, okay? And lastly, we go to performance. And in our test, performance is heavily based on where our code actually runs, okay? And in testing library, our code runs inside our test runner. And when I'm saying test runner, it can either be vtest or it can be jest, or I don't want to know, don't tell me Karma or Mocha. But these are our test environments, test runners. And test runners usually run tests inside Node. And since our component uses the window functionality, we must have something else which is not the native Node solution. So this is where mock DOM actually comes into play. And this is JS DOM, or it can also be Happy DOM, which is a nicer solution and a newer solution. Both of them are actually JavaScript implementations of the DOM that are built for tests. And since they are built for tests, they don't contain all of the functionalities. Meaning, let's say I want to use location, or I want to test the layout. This isn't implemented inside JS DOM or Happy DOM. This is an example of a popular question in Stack Overflow. The engineer is actually asking how to test Anchor's href with React testing library. And what he claims here is that when we click on a link, an Anchor element, the window location href doesn't change. And this isn't a problem with React testing library. It's because JS DOM doesn't implement location at all. So this is fairly popular, and this is the inherent problems with JS DOM and Happy DOM. A few more points. Since they are implemented with JavaScript, they are slower than browsers that are usually implemented using C++ or something like that. For example, query selector role in JS DOM or Happy DOM will take you around 4 milliseconds. And inside testing library, we call query selector role quite a lot. And if you've seen my talk at ReactNext last year, you'll probably know why. So basically, testing using a mock DOM is, and this is an illustration, is something like this. When when you go to a surf class and at first you practice on dry sand, right? So when you practice on dry sand, you don't get the waves or the curves. You don't have anything that happens in real life. So testing inside a mock DOM is sort of like that, because you need to do things that doesn't happen in the actual environment. You need to mock fetch. You need to mock browser APIs. We don't need all of that if we use an actual browser. So real browsers, Playwright. No global mocking is needed because we're using Playwright, which runs on a real browser. And it's mostly written in C++, so it's faster. And the main issue is that at the moment, Playwright Component Tests has a lot of magic. And to be honest, it's not the nice kind of magic, at least to me, and I hope I'll convince you too. So let's take an example. In Playwright Component Tests, we have two components that take part in the test. We have our terminal that runs Node, and we have our browser that runs JavaScript. And it means that there needs to be some sort of connection between these two components, because if we want to test that a change has happened in an input, the change will happen, the event will happen in the browser, but our test needs to know about that. So there needs to be some sort of event propagation between the browser and our Node environment. So let's take an example. Whenever we call npm run test component test, what happens first is that Vite actually bundles the entire solution, the entire components that our test needs. So a new bundle is created as part of our test, and then our test starts to run. Whenever the component is mounted, as we said before, it's mounted to an empty index.html, and then Playwright actually navigates to that index.html. If we want to fill the search box with the word Barbazol, then it means that our test runner will need to pass this command to the browser, and the browser will need to run this command. So the browser then went and changed the actual input, and after that, it will need to report that operation to our test runner. And after we get the information that the onChange handler has been called with Barbazol, we can then make any assertion we want on that propagated event. So there needs to be some sort of two-way connection between them. And we know magic is nice until it's not, okay? Until it breaks and we don't understand why it broke. We don't understand why things happen because we didn't implement it. We didn't write that. And a few more points about this magic. So as I said, Vite bundler actually works for us. So it means that it doesn't matter if my application is using Webpack or it's using Vite, it won't use my configs. So it means that in Playwright Component Tests, the component isn't really what our users will see because it uses its own configs to build the components. And as we said, events are propagated to the Node test runner, and sometimes it breaks, we don't know. There's another specific restriction here that no complex object can be passed because since we're passing data from our test runner to our browser, it needs to pass some sort of serialization. So some objects can't be passed, living objects like the process in Node. And let's summarize the difference with an example. I created a test with 7,000 DOM nodes, okay? And I know it sounds a lot. It's not really a lot. If you if you wrote a test of a page, this is usually the amount of DOM nodes. And on the one hand, I had React testing library with vtest and Happy DOM, and on the other, I had Playwright Component Tests. Who thinks testing library was faster? Okay, nice. Who thinks Playwright was faster? Cool. So let's see the difference. Testing library actually took 10 seconds to run this test, okay? And it wasn't a complex test. I just wanted to know to get by role and get all of the elements that have the list item role. And this is Playwright Component Tests. You can see the time it took, 1.6 seconds. Okay, that's 10th the time. That's incredible. So basically what happens here is that the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Because the bigger the DOM is, the harder it will be for testing library to operate properly in mock environments, okay? Because the mock DOM environments are actually calling get computed styles and other functionalities that in JavaScript take a lot of time. So my recommendation is somewhat like this. For page testing, when we have a big DOM, you should probably try to aim and test your components inside a real browser. But for unit testing, when you have a small DOM, testing library can still provide the value that you need with faster interaction and faster feedback loop. And this is why it looks like the whole ecosystem is actually moving towards testing in the browser. So I think it was 3 weeks ago, Vitest actually announced that they're going to provide browser mock, and I had some tests with it. It's quite nice. Storybook provides interaction testing, and a lot of people are actually using Storybook together with Playwright, okay? Which is quite cool, nice solution. So let's summarize quite quickly, because we don't have a lot of time. Playwright Component Test is actually a step in the right direction. But in my opinion, at the moment, it's still not yet ready. It's still experimental, and the magic is nice until it breaks. So, sorry. Okay, nice. So are we here yet? In my opinion, no. We should probably test our components in a real browser, okay? But we're not yet there because, in my opinion, Playwright Component Test isn't fully baked yet. So, thank you again for coming. The demo app is here in the QR code, and come grab stickers. And if you have any questions, come to me. Thanks.